Hey, what's up, guys? It's your boy Daze, and you're about to watch Thorin rant for about 3 hours.
When people talk about the G2 that HooXi has led as the in-game leader, there are only two swings between extremes that take place. Either they were always trash and never really were good, or they're good now and really good, and they never ever were trash. And what I find so bizarre to me is both are too extreme. Like, the idea this ever was a terrible team is nonsense if you look into it. I'm going to show you in this video. The idea they're like the greatest team of all time, there's a couple of data points, but aside from that, there's so little still on the resume. Obviously, that's going too far as well. So to me, the key thing is that they were never terrible. They were never really bad. They were never like one of the worst. If you actually go and look, which we're going to do in a minute, you'll probably be shocked. Maybe even your memory will realize, oh, I actually maybe like overemphasized certain data points, or oh, there were a lot less bad places I thought, or you look who they lost to, and all of a sudden a lot of these results don't even look that bad. Now, I want to make a key distinction here that I'll come back to later, which is there is a big difference, quite a key distinction, between failing to live up to big expectations, which justifiably may be the case. You're big names, you spent a lot of money, you're an org that has a history of success, you know, all that jazz. You have players who haven't won yet. There's a big difference between that and then actually being like objectively bad at the game, terrible results, everything's bad, all performance metrics. There's an enormous difference there, and that distinction is very key, particularly for this video. So let's go and look at the results of G2 under HooXi. So as you see, we have here the HooXi Wikipedia page, and if you go back, obviously he was in Copenhagen Flames right up until the last major, and then he was just chilling because obviously they were supposed to be sold in those months, and people were they going to get bought as a whole thing, or were they going to get bought piecemeal, etc. And in the end, after the other G2 lineup flunked out of Cologne and didn't do that well with LXCB at the end, they replaced him. In came HooXi to G2. Now, a key point everyone always forgets when they talk about HooXi's G2 and contrast it with past G2s is they contrast it directly with LXCB's G2. By the way, I did the whole thing about Lexi being an OG there. I don't think Lexi is a very good in-game leader. But what they always forget to mention, bit of a small detail, right, is that JKS wasn't in the LXCB lineup. Jax was, as we'll get to later. But anyway, Jax leaves along with LXCB, and HooXi and JKS both join, and the first event they play is, as usual, the groups for Blast. Then they had ESL Pro League Season 16. This was when the GigaChad meme started and all the hype. Then obviously the RMR went sus and they didn't get through it and they failed, therefore they didn't go to the major. Then they were a bit lackluster here. Then they won the Blast World Final. They did awesome in the groups at the beginning of this year. They won Kovitz, and obviously they're doing fine other than that, even though, yes, their series streak has been snapped. But let's just go back. There's not even that many LANs here, boys, so let's be real. Like, this is a LAN, in a sense. Like, it also includes, essentially, the 4 finals if you qualify there. So if we count those two as, I mean, do we even count those as one? We can count them separately if you want. Let's count them separately for the moment, even though technically I wouldn't normally. So we'll go, like, Blast 4 groups, there's 1 LAN. ESL Pro League Season 6, 2 LANs. The RMR's a 3rd LAN. We're just going to do this for the sake of it. Blast 4 Finals is a 4th LAN. Blast World Finals is a 5th LAN. Blast Spring Groups is a 6th LAN, and then IEM Katowice is a 7th LAN, and technically Pro League hasn't finished, it's ongoing now. That would be the 8th LAN that HooXi has played with G2. So by the way, it's still not even that big a sample size, right? 8 LANs, and he joined his first tournament. This would obviously be the last date, wouldn't it, on the 8th? So it's going to be sometime in August at some point, basically, is when the Blast 4 groups will start. So let's look at each one, and what you'll see is, like, this narrative just falls apart, the idea that they sucked. We'll look at all the 8 LANs that he's played. And we'll obviously ignore Pro Leagues, it's still ongoing. So it starts with the Blast Premier Fall groups, remember. Now, this was, to be fair, the format where they still had the best of ones in the first section. This is where the groups technically just qualifies you. So if you win the group, like, oh no, this one didn't even qualify you because it was best of ones. So this one, the group was only for seeding. So even if you won the group like Astralis here, you don't just go straight through. You still have to play in the finals part. This was slightly different than how they redid it now. Obviously, they didn't do the other last challenger match or whatever in this next format. They did change the format for now. But okay, so they had this one. And by the way, if you actually go and look at it, in theory, they've got a pretty... I think they've actually got one of the harder groups. They've got Liquid, who was solid at least. This is when Liquid's already had the result with Kindar and had like the finish at Cologne. They've got Navi, who's just lost Cologne barely. Complexity's not great, but obviously they're the weak team in the group. And G2 themselves are a top 10 team in the world. So, like, yeah, this is a pretty solid group. They lose to Liquid in the opener. Okay, first lineup the first time the HooXi JK Slams ever played together, by the way, with G2. They lost the opener, narrow game on Mirage. Then they lost also on Mirage in close fashion to Na'Vi, who at this point in time is considered the second best team in the world. So they go down here. They beat Big 2-0 pretty easily. They lost to Vitality, but remember, Vitality, this is when they've just brought in Spinks, I think. Pretty sure they'd had him already at this point in time. Yes, he actually goes ham in this series, and obviously at the next tournament, Pro League, they actually win the tournament. But okay, this is Vitality on the rise again. But okay, that's like a result where people would hope like G2 would win and beat them. They didn't, and okay, it wasn't actually that close. Like, yeah, their map was a smash, but the other two were pretty big smashes too. So then they play the last chance match, which ends up being against Vitality again. This time they beat them 2-1. It's a way closer series. Vitality could have won 2-0. G2 could have won 2-0. Instead, G2 wins 2-1, and a very close Mirage, the third one. So at your first event, yeah, you lost to Liquid and Na'Vi. Not even that big a deal. And by the way, maps like Mirage, those are Fragger maps, aren't they? Then you lost basically because of a game on Inferno, if you want to put it like that, against Vitality. Okay. And then you won against Vitality, a top 5, 6, 7, 8 team in the world, in a best of 3. There's nothing wrong with those results. I mean, you got through the last 4 finals, so let's keep going. Then you go to ESL Pro League Season 16. Now, people might remember, this is where all the memes began about HooXi. People before that, some people were thinking he comes from Copenhagen Flames. He ain't going to be good. Wasn't in the IGL we all thought was good in that team. Like, what the fuck? Like, surely Alexi B's, but a lot of people were a bit out on him, right? Especially because like they lost a couple of those games in the Blast, even though they still got through. But then you go and look at ESL Pro League Season 16. Crucially, in the group that they're in, they have the number 1 team in the world, FaZe Clan. And by the way, won the last LAN, ESL 1 Cologne. IEM Cologne, it's already called by then. And obviously, he'd won the Major previously, all that jazz. So yeah, the group were FaZe Clan. They win the group, they 5-0. They win all 5 of their best of 3s. And they were winning in 2-0s as well, look. So they were going 2-0 MIBR, easy work. They go 2-0 Big, close game, but that's because Big was always able to match up with teams, play a good game generally. Then they go 2-0 over, who gives a fuck who that is, for the win Esports, easy win, obviously nobody's. Then they beat G2, the FaZe Clan, 2-0. And by the way, this already started to show you why G2 was going to become an interesting head-to-head with FaZe Clan, because they won on Nuke. Nuke was like the home map of FaZe that they were the best in the world on. And then obviously they beat Outsiders, who would go on to win the next major, but obviously with a slightly different lineup. Actually, no, this was actually with exactly this lineup. And they beat them 2-0, but it was a close second map on Ancient. I mean, Ancient was actually a map that Outsiders was pretty good at, that style, obviously. They managed to win anyway, so they 2-0 everyone. 2-0 all their opponents. Look at the difference in rounds. This is crazy. That's actually very impressive. Plus 73. Vitality's plus 40 in their group. Mouse 32 in theirs. 47 for Cloud9. They just smash everyone. That was a very good group stage, and to beat FaZe Clan was no joke at all, even though, yes, FaZe Clan typically would lose one game to a contender in a group stage and then bounce back in the playoffs. And then they go into the playoffs. Obviously, it means they skip around because they won the group. They go here, and they have to play Na'Vi right out the gate. By the way, Na'Vi's still a scary team at this point in time. Yes, they actually, if you look at the stats, were falling off. This is when Na'Vi's fall began. But they still managed to eke out that game against Heroic, where they had the pauses and all that jazz. Heroic, a team that's always matched up well with them. And then, obviously, they play against G2. Yeah, it's a reasonably close series, but actually, if anything, it's G2 that could have won every map. Na'Vi actually only could potentially have won one, and who knows about the others. And then they get the win on Mirage again to make up for the part. And they win at this point in time, that's the number 2 team in the world, guys. They've just beaten them on LAN, and they just beat a few series prior the number 1 team in the world. So actually already the start's looking awesome, right? Then they go to the semis, and yeah, they lose to Vitality, and the close map's really set. The second map's really close. Could have been a 3-map series. Vitality's a team, as you've seen, it's back and forth between them, and Vitality wins the tournament. So let's be real. The group stage, they get through to the finals. That's all that really matters. Yeah, they didn't look super impressive. They look really impressive, basically minus like 1 map at this whole fucking tournament, pretty much, at Pro League, and they're wrecking everyone by really impressive numbers, capturing scalps of the biggest teams, and then they lose in the semis, but they lose to the champion. Like, there's actually no reason, Ben Man, they won their group. Why, if they were just in a different group, if they were in C instead of B, then they'd be on the other side of the bracket Wouldn't they probably be playing Vitality in the final? And even if they lost, I mean, it's a best of 5 there. It'd be interesting. I would like to know who would win the best of 5. In a best of 5 there, even if they lost, they'd be second at this event. So on their first land, they would have come second, but they'll have to go 3rd to 4th because they happen to play the eventual champion in the semi-finals. This is all fine stuff so far, which, yeah, I know everyone thinks so, but let's go. Because let's be real, guys, it's only this next tournament that's bad. And even then, there's context, boys. When we jump in the context, you'll see it's really not that bad. So then we go to the dreaded RMR. Oh my goodness. This is where they failed everything and blew the major. You remember this? They didn't make it to the major. Now in this RMR, remember, just like the major, the Swiss portion, the first 2 games you play are BO1s, then it's BO3. Either, if you're high up enough, to get you through to the next, I mean, second, it doesn't always have to be, obviously, if you go 1-1, it's another BO1. But to get progressed to the major, you have to win a best of 3, and to get eliminated, you have to lose a best of 3. So what happened to G2 here? Well, let's look, okay. So obviously, they don't make it, they're down here. So what happens is, the first game they play is against Ecstatic on Ancient, and they easily smash it. This is one where actually like HooXi's like top frags or whatever. Everyone's like Giga Chad and doing all that meme, right? Then after that, they play Cloud9 on Mirage. By the way, Cloud9 had 2 of the best players of the year in a very, very high level in the HLTV rating for 2022. I think Shiro and Axile, weren't they like number 4 and number 5, or number 5 and number 6, or 4 and 6, or whatever? Like, they were way high up on the list. Essentially, like, they had arguably the best 1-2 punch in all of World Counter-Strike on their team. This is a BO1 and Mirage, a fragging map, guys. Like, you can lose a BO1 to this team. So you lose a BO1 to them, Cloud9. That's not even a disgrace. This isn't a big pressure playoff game where Cloud9 sometimes breaks down. This is the sort of time where they just dust off even good teams. Cloud9 beats a lot of the best teams in the world. So then you come to their next match. They're 1-1 now. So they have another BO1, don't they? And they play against 1win, right? So 1win is that Russian team, isn't it? With Deco, if you remember him, good old Flamey, Lollipop 221K from Belarus, if you remember him. So they play them. Yes, now obviously you're not supposed to lose to them. It's on fucking Ancient, boys. A map I actually consider just a bad map. Now you can argue maybe they could have vetoed differently. Maybe the map pool wasn't deep enough, folks, at the times G2. Yeah, that's all legit. But okay, is that the end of the world to lose a BO1? Bear in mind, this one's totally fine to lose. Even many good teams would lose a BO1 in, especially in like a RMR or something. It happens quite frequently. It's very rare the number 1 team 3-0s RMRs in Swiss systems. So okay, realistically, you lost to 1win. Okay, that's not that great, right? Still a BO1 though. That can happen to a lot of teams. A lot of teams can get some BS loss. Like, look up here. Doesn't this mean Fnatic lost to bloody B8? Fnatic went top 8 at the major. If we go up here, Cloud9 themselves lost to NIP. This is the one where they got Alexi B. They don't even have the head trick guy yet. They're losing best of 3s on LAN, and they're actually like considered one of the better teams in the world, remember? Go look across the board, people can lose. I mean, Spirit, who everyone loves, by the way, is losing BO1s to Sprout. Aren't Sprouts supposed to be bad? But you're okay with Spirit losing them. It's okay. So then you get to the BO3. Now, the BO3 is where they really did fuck up. Yeah, they fucked up a BO1 against 1win, but it's a BO1. So then your whole tournament life comes down to a BO3, right? And yeah, if you're G2 and one of the best teams in the world is on LAN, you should win a BO3. But you can still lose a BO3 too. I mean, as I said, teams like FaZe used to sometimes lose a BO3, but then in tournaments that allowed it, come back in the playoffs and win the whole tournament. They did it at IEM Katowice. They did it at ESL Pro League. Not this one, the season 15 one at the beginning of the year. They did it loads of times. So then you go and you look at the BO1 the BO3 that they lost. Right, they smashed the first map, Vertigo, 16-3. Easy. They go to the T-side of Vertigo, 12 rounds. Then they get smashed themselves on Mirage with a bad CT half. Okay, yeah, that's dodgy. And then they managed to lose Inferno, relatively close. It's a really close first half. They just don't get going enough on CT side. And they lose. Still a close game. It's not the end of the world, right? And then let's just look at the series. Yeah, what do you know? They do okay in fragging, but like Acor has the game of his life and outperforms Modesty. Nico's just average in this game, while people like IM managed to go plus 10. Like, It's not even that big a deal, this game. Yeah, it sucks, but it's not like you went into a format where the Swiss system's 3 BO3s and you lost 3 BO3s on LAN out of 3 or out of a potential 5. No. Realistically, you lost the Cloud9 one. Okay, that's not a big deal. You lost the 1-win one. Sucks, but it's a BO1. And then you lost 1 best of 3 and against a team who, by the way, had the game of their lives and did nothing at the major. So then you look beyond that. That's it, by the way, guys. The real reason I think why people hated on G2 so much is because losing here meant that they didn't even get to play at the major, and then the major takes so long, it felt like, well, they've been bad for like 3 months. Like, they're just not relevant. Like, whoa, what's going on? As soon as we came back to competitive play, this wasn't even an issue. Because let's go to the next LAN they play. And this LAN is at the end of November. So it starts on November 23rd, and it's the Blast Fall Finals. Look, not a prestige event, but a decent-sized event. Obviously, one of the big events for Blast, right? And at this tournament, where do they place? Oh, 5th to 6th. It's only top 8 of the tournament, right? That must be a bad placing. Well, let's go look who they played, shall we? These groups are actually pretty fair. They have Na'Vi, who is falling off already at this point in time and has only managed top 8 at the major. You have Team Liquid, who almost made top 8 at the major and had some good runs before, like the final of Pro League, and they'd had their top 4. Or they had top 6, at IM Cologne. And then, they didn't do that well at the major because they didn't get through, and maybe they should have. So they come to this tournament, and then they're Fluxor, who's Phelps' team, who now Zeus coaches, but he didn't back then. So if you look in this group, let's look what happened. They lost 2-0 to Team Liquid in a pretty close series all in all. And Team Liquid, by this point in time, is considered a top 4, top 5 team in the world. Look, if you want to be the best team, you're going to win a lot of these games. But for where G2 is, aside from the RMR, they're losing to real teams here, guys. So they get 2-0 by Liquid, but in close fashion. And then also easily beat out Fluxo overall. Yes, the second map's close, but you'd expect they would have won that nuke game. And then they come to... that means because of the format, remember, you don't just play out a full GSL group because top 3 makes the playoffs. So that just means you play 5th to 6th. 5th to 6th, they play Heroic, who won the tournament. So just like Pro League, where they could have had a higher placing, but they lost to the champion in an earlier round, they lost to the champion in the quarterfinals here. And by the way, even if they'd won their group, they would have played the champion Heroic in the semis and could have lost to them there. So that means realistically, unless they just for some weird reason came second in their group, they were probably at best only going to be able to place top 4 here if they just lost to the team that beat all the other big teams they faced. And what was this match like? It's not even like it was a blowout, guys. It was a 3-map series. G2's own map is actually more of a stomp on Nuke than the Heroic one is on Mirage, especially since Heroic starts CT side. And then the Vertigo game is actually pretty close. And in fact, G2 even won CT half. Like, this is a close game, boys. There's nothing crazy about this. Then you go look at the series. Yabi has already one of his best series when he's like a newer player in the team. We know now he blew up at Katowice, and it seems like he's like maybe coming in a little bit of form. All in all, G2 plays well. Monacy frags out, Nico frags out, Hunter's alright, JKS is okay for being the 4th best player, and HooXi doesn't frag much, but that's HooXi. This isn't even like some terrible performance. This isn't even some nightmare. Even on the deciding map that they lost, by the way, still, people are fragging, people are in the game, they're not getting blown out. So is this even that bad a result? They finished 5th to 6th, largely just because they lost to Team Liquid. Losing to Team Liquid made them have to play at this point in the tournament where they met the team that won the tournament. But even if they'd beaten Team Liquid, and then if they'd have also beaten Na'Vi, they'd probably go out in the semis and finish top 4 anyway, so they're not winning the event. So let's keep going. I think it's even that bad for the results. Then let's go to the Blast World Final, which was the following month. Now at this tournament, they won the tournament, didn't they? Brilliant. Nothing to complain about, right? Now they did lose a series in this tournament in their own sort of FaZe fashion, which is they lost in the opening match to FaZe in 3 maps. I still think FaZe is a very good team, and obviously FaZe was around from winning the previous tournament. They were in the final of Blast Fall. It's just a really close series, really well done. By the way, there's a world where G2 could have 2-0'd. They won Nuke convincingly, and then they almost won in overtime on Inferno. Okay, yes, they get smashed on the last map, okay, but they could have won 2-0 themselves. They then go down and play literally the world champions of Counter-Strike, Outsiders, and beat them 2-0 easily, and they even stomp them on Mirage. Stomp them with a 15-0 CT half. This is the team that just won the World Championship. This is a mega result. Then they go on, they beat Vitality, champions of Pro League. Yeah, haven't been that great before. Beat them in, yes, a close series at times. Then they 2-0 FaZe Clan in a close series. At the time, I thought the best team in the world. Then in the final, they 2-0, not that close. Team Liquid, who's done some great upset work, and they win the LAN. Then they go to the next tournament, which is obviously this year. It was the Blast Spring groups. This is where they changed the format to be best of 3, and now what happens is the winner of the group just goes to the spring finals, and it's just the other teams that finish 2nd, 3rd, and 4th who go down and play these matches. So you go down here, and they have a group that has Big in, somewhat tricky team always, especially in this sort of phase of the tournament. They have Na'Vi, who admittedly is looking a bit whack by now and having some problems. And they have Nip, who've got head trick in, but no one knows where they're at as a team. Maybe some upset potential. They 2-0 Big, generally pretty good, right? They 2-0 Na'Vi. This one's closer. Still 2-0s all the way across the board. In the final, they play Na'Vi again. More convincing, 2-0 again. They're through to the spring finals, which they've yet to play. Then they go to IEM Katowice, the most recent event. And what do you know? They're obviously already in the tournament itself. They beat Big 2-0 convincingly. They beat FaZe Clan. Look, first map was close, but that's also the map FaZe used to be very, very good on. So actually pretty legit result to 2-0. I'm not even have to go to a third map. They easily handle Simple's Na'Vi 2-0. Just easy, light work. They go to the playoffs. They spank Liquid, a closer series than before, but still not that close. You still beat them handily 2-0. And then at this point, remember, you're on like the 18 map winning streak or whatever. Then in the finals, you get all the way up to 21 map winning streak. You lose a map, but you still win the series. And at this point, you're on something like 14 or 15 series in a row you've won. And you win the whole LAN. You won 2 tournaments, one without dropping a series, and one dropping only your first series. And you have this amazing, eventually, like 16 series win if you go to the Pro League as well, and the 21 maps in a row. Now, the problem is, once you start going into the streaks, etc., now you're going too far the other way. You're trying to make them like the greatest team of all time or top 5. They're not even vaguely there yet, guys. They don't have the trophies, the resumes, any of that stuff. Now, obviously, the results show there. It's really overblown how bad they are. Essentially, it's just the RMR. It's just the 1-win game and the game against Gamer Legion and then not being present at the RMR. But there's more to it than that. Because I think when you look into this, like you can actually logically look at the performances as well and see that it's not as simple as saying like they were bad or HooXi's G2 was bad or sucked. Did they ever suck? Like, let's go and look at that, shall we? So first of all, let's look. Here's the LXCB lineup and how long they played. So I'll put in the times up here that they played together. And in the LXCB lineup, we can see Nico is far and away the best player. He's got a 1.21 rating, 1.16 KD. Hunter's pretty good too, but as a second star, he's just pretty good, right? Monacy, actually, as a third star and a young, like, 16-year-old rookie or whatever, he's pretty good, right? This is pretty legit, especially because of how young he is. Like, you look at this lineup. These are Monacy's first big lands as well, guys. Now, Jax is terrible. Okay, that's not great. It's minus 112. And Lexi B himself's no big fragger. He's a better fragger than HooXi. And obviously, he's 0.92 and he has minus 208. So you look at the 3 stars. This is pretty good. This is quite a lot to work with, right? This isn't bad at all. These guys are pretty legit. But then let's go and look when HooXi joins and during his tenure. So during HooXi's tenure, the best player, by the way, is Monacy by rating, by kill-to-death ratio, by kill-to-death difference. It's Monacy. He's gone from being the 3rd best player and a 1.12 player, a 1.20 rating, to over the time span that he's played with HooXi, he's actually got a 1.37 KD, which is monstrous, but he is an AWPer, and a 1.23 rating, and he's become the best player in the team. Now, true, it ain't as simple, obviously, as being like, he made Monacy better, but I will just say, Monacy was much better, pretty much the whole time he played with HooXi than he was with LXCB. Now, it's a little bit trickier, though, because obviously, the LXCB G2 lineup had Monacy when he had never played any big lands. So those were his first, 3, 4, 5 lands, which bedded him in. So that could also play the factor. Also, he might just have individual form spike. It's not always simple as the team and the in-game leader. But even so, you can see that actually G2's a more dangerous team, significantly so, I would say, when you have HooXi in the line. Because then you have Nico. He's still really good. He's still 1.20, 1.18 KD. Still a banger play. Basically just as good, slightly worse. And then Monacy's just way better. Then Hunter's actually a similar sort of level, a little bit worse, but he's still a pretty good player. Then you have JKS is positive. Remember, Jax was like minus something. What was Jax? Minus 112. over 77 maps. And would you believe it? They've played 77 maps with HooXi, by the way. And JKS is plus 102, and he's your 4th best player. So HooXi has more firepower and better players, but also his team with better players is a better team. Monacy's better. He's got JKS contributing more. Nico's just as good. Hunter's maybe slightly worse. But this is just in terms of raw numbers and rating. We don't know in the game. Maybe he's quite comparable, right? And then HooXi himself is a worse player, worse fragger, worse everything than Alexi B. I think even that in-game leader. But his team is better, and they're definitely not bad. But I don't think Alexi B one was that bad. It just wasn't as good as it could have been. You go and look at the individual players. Obviously, this is the point when HooXi joins. So before that, I mean, it's pretty much the same if you're Nico, right? You go to Monacy, that's the big difference. So this was when HooXi joined. So before that, he's having a bunch of events that sometimes are 1.0 or something. After HooXi joins, he's never 1.0 ever, mate. He only has a couple of events that are below 1.2. His performance is monstrous. You go look at Hunter. This is when HooXi joined. This one here. So he's having some big performances, some smaller ones. He has big performances. It's kind of the same, right? JKS is obviously a big game changer. Like I said, JKS, he joined and it wasn't that great initially. And quite frankly, it's never been monstrous except Kovitz, pretty good at World Finals, the 2 big events they won. Look at his fragging. If your 4th best player even can hit a 0.7 kills per round, you're going to be monstrous, especially when you're superstars. Look, Nico might have a bad finals series, or Hunter might have a quiet quarters. Over the events, you see, they're still putting up numbers. If your 4th best player's like that, you almost can't be bad. And spoiler, this team isn't bad. In fact, that's why when they're all firing on all cylinders like this, they just flat out win the event and 2-0 everyone. It's actually pretty impressive stuff, isn't it? The reason I think that people have honed in so much on this is because, one, HooXi became a divisive meme. Is he the Giga Chad? Is he secretly a genius? And is he the only reason for all these results? Or is he a moron just carried by 4 strong players, a bunch of them who've been star players in other teams or top 20 players in past lineups way before HooXi? It's neither to me. It's neither. Then also you've got the factor, which I've always painted into this narrative, that I think people just had an expectation that G2, they couldn't even just be good, like I showed you they were, minus the RMR. They had to be the best. Not even just very good. They had to be the best right out of the gate. And I think the reasons why are, one, because the Alexi B lineup didn't accomplish that. And why was the Alexi B lineup formed where they signed Monacy for 600k from Na'Vi and brought in Alexi B, formerly from OG? Why did they make those big signings? Because when they'd made the major final the year prior to 2022 and 2021 at PGL Stockholm, everyone thought, wow, they're in the major final. Yeah, they probably shouldn't win the major, but what do they need to get to the level where they could beat and outgun a Na'Vi? Because they didn't have the same firepower as Na'Vi in that final. People were like, right, make big changes. So they brought in a potential one-day star AWPer. They brought in a better in-game leader who, in theory, can even frag a bit himself. When you get that lineup, yeah, you were shooting for number 1. You're not saying I want to be second at a major again or top 4 or have some final. You're saying I want to win everything. Yeah, with those expectations, the Alexi B lineup failed. And because the Alexi B lineup failed to reach those expectations, still made a final of their own at a big prestige event. That means that people were like, right, I'm done. I'm ready for you to win now, so make the changes you need. And also, I'll just throw in there, Nico had never won a major. Nico had never won a prestige event. He'd even lost this Kovitz with XCB. So you look at that and you're like, if you're looking from the Nico perspective, how long is it going to be? How many years until he wins a tournament? And is G2 going to put the right pieces around him? And clearly he's a very good player himself individually. So is it his teammates? And is he just unlucky? What's going on here? Is it his beef with the IGL, which is obviously a big topic? Is that why Alexi B was out? Will you appreciate HooXi? The Nico thing, because he's such an all-time great transcendent player, I understand it towers over this story, and his shadow and what he had or had not accomplished does cast a large sort of, this is the thing obscuring us from looking at the light of just reality, isn't it? And then also, you did buy Monacy for 600k at the beginning of the year. At this point in time, before HooXi played with them, Monacy was hit and miss. He was actually pretty good. I thought for where he was for somebody who was 16, hadn't played any big lands, he was tracking very well already, and it was a slightly upward curve, and it was having the good performances. But people here, 600k, I mean, business-wise, he expected to be one of the best players now. So they also were like, well, where's this guy? He's not as good as we thought. He's certainly not the new ship, but he's all that jazz, right? So I think these are the reasons why people got so hyped about the idea of HooXi had to succeed or fail right out of the gate. And when he didn't make the major, that was it. He was done. He was terrible. Nothing worked about it. I always thought when that team failed the major, I said this on so many of my shows, it never made sense to me. I looked at the lineup, especially the idea JKS does fit the CT positions and is going to be your 4th best player. It's like, bro, if he's your 4th best, you have to be one of the best teams in the world. Something's gone really, 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 really wrong if you haven't. In fact, fact, if they had, by the way, had a load of events where they're always like 7th to 8th and losing to nobodies, I would have put a lot of blame on HooXi and said, bro, look at the team you had. Look at the players you had. You couldn't get more out of them. But I actually look at what he's gotten out of them. Like, could he have gotten much more aside from qualifying to that major? Hasn't he gotten a lot out of these players? Yes, he's got a lot. He's got amazing Arsenal players, probably the most skilled lineup in the world, even aggregating his performance. Yeah, that's great, but doesn't mean everyone else would pilot them to big titles. I think generally he's done pretty good. Like, you look who they lose to, tends to be the eventual champion of the tournament, right? If one of your tournament lives gets taken by the champion and not in the final, you are not going to have the deepest placings every single time, are you? We even saw the FaZe clans of the world sometimes come 5th to 6th if they had to play the team that would win or was super dominant in the 5th to 6th round, right? So in summary, and I'll use an illustrative method here, there were 7 lands that HooXi played at. So let's do this. There's 7, right? So what we'll do is we'll go like this, right? He won 2 of them, so we'll take those 2 away. He won 2 of the 7 lands. The best possible result you can have. By the way, only losing 1 best of 3 doing so. Then he made it to the semi-finals of ESL Pro League and lost to the eventual champion. That's not even that bad. We've got 4 lands left, boys. 3 of them are already bangers. Then he lost to the eventual champion at Blast Fall and one of the best upset teams in Team Liquid. So there's only 3 left. These are all fine so far. Those are 4 lands that are all totally fine. Now, one of these was Blast Spring this year, which he just aced and got through easily. We're only down to 2 lands left. One of them is the Blast Fall when he just joined the groups and he qualified from that. There's 1 land left his entire career that was vaguely bad with G2, and it was the RMR where they lost thanks to 1 bad best of 1, the one against 1 win, and 1 bad best of 3 against Gamer Legion where some of the players had the game of their life. Is that really that bad? The Beatles said they get by with a little help from their friends, but I get by with a little help from my Patreon community. And this video was kindly supported by Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, Bot Pounder 420, Thorin, Animosity, Tobias Bernasconi, Jensen Goh, Tosh, and a special thanks always goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to ask me a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers to find out who are the upcoming guests? Maybe you want to take part in one of those lengthy but intense esports discussions I have with my donators, or maybe you want to suggest a guest or a topic that I could cover. Well, if any of those tickle your fancy, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where in the description box below there is a Patreon link.